10 Ultras, it's going to be pretty hard to deal with unless you have a bazillion trillion Immortals. Here come all the Ultralists up, just ripping everything to shreds. Women trying to warp in, trying to get good storms up, putting the Colossus on the high ground, getting the cannons in there, but the Ultras are just too strong. Their headbutt does so much damage, and it's so unbelievably cool that it does so much damage. And still, look how much damage those Ultralists do to Colossi. That's just outrageous. And in just a second now, Human will decide that maybe this is a little bit too sticky of a situation. That it might be best to type out and rethink it for another day. More storms going down, valiantly trying. You know, all you gotta do is micro these stalkers a little bit. He's just gonna micro a little bit harder. Oh! If only he had a little more micro. Human, you're making my daily last longer. I am time 6ing you. God, he's still really hanging in there. He's just not giving up. What a trooper. Wow, yeah, I mean... Okay, there's a good game. Alright, fantastic. Yes, nifty-tastic. Hung in there a while. Couldn't stick it through all the way, but... Regardless, good job. And I am stealing that build by Human because that was awesome. So now, finally. Yes, now. I'm going to take some questions. So yes. That is delicious-tastic. So here's a great question by Kadrid, who of course is a longtime viewer of the Day 9 Daily. I have to cheers with my empty Gatorade bottle to you. To Kadrid, who says, when you're maxed on food and still sitting back, aren't you giving your opponent a chance to catch up in army size? Why not attack and rebuild your army mid-battle? Because it's like a 1-2-3 punch move. So it is absolutely correct that if you build this maxed army, you do give your opponent to catch up. But you have to think about your production infrastructure. In other words, how fast can you rebuild shit? So for Zerg, you have a great ability to rebuild shit, because when you are maxed, you just add on more larvae, and add on more larvae, and add on more larvae, until you have about 60 to 70 larvae just chilling. Now, if you're Protoss and you're max and you're against the Zerg and the Zerg's max, Protoss is probably going to win that confrontation in Starcraft 2. That generally appears to be the trend. So let's say Protoss wins this battle, and then Protoss is probably maybe at like 100, 120 food, and Zerg is maxed again, and all these 70 larvae of units crush that army, and now it's a 200 army versus an 80 food army. So, then you just go in and sweep in for the kill. So step 1, get maxed. Step 2, wait for a confrontation. And in the middle of that confrontation, make stuff. And then step 3, you have so much stuff that you can just kill them. Now, if this were something like Terran versus Protoss, it's a little harder to say who should be sitting back and hanging out. It's all very dependent on your ability to remake stuff and whether you have the defender's advantage. A meching Terran in StarCraft 2 has a huge defender's advantage because tanks are imbalanced, right? They're really good. So if you have a lot of tanks in a defensive position, come attack me, you know? And if you have like maxed Vikings and tanks, you're very hard to just penetrate in any way, shape, or form. So seems completely reasonable to sit and just starve your opponent resource-wise. Zerg, likewise, if you're in Artosis' position, you take the whole map and you say, if you want any more money, you gotta come through my maxed army plus 100 larvae worth of stuff coming right after that. So Zerg has these effectively 350 food army because of this ability to stockpile larvae. And of course, we got the chance to see Major Malfunction say, never give up, never surrender. Yes, absent indubitably. So K. Darris says, Day 9, Ultralists seem to come out at just the right time in the first game. Of course, credit to Artosis' Ihan timing. Do you think that this is linked to the buff in the last patch with the speed built in, or did people just not experiment enough with them? I think that Ultralisks were a decent choice in the first game, or in the first builds of StarCraft 2. But the fact is, roaches were just so good, you should just make roaches. Because, if roaches are one food, just make a bunch of roaches. And then when you get max and you attack, rally your 70 larvae worth of roaches. And, awesome. And the Ultralisks, they were pretty good, especially when they just did a huge base damage. They were pretty decent, but especially now that they're just these armored unit killers, it's basically like forcing Protosses to be a little bit more creative with their unit mixes. So let's see here. Let us divine. Buzzjuice says, "Hey Day9, by the way, nice photo of you in the HDH show match today." Why, thank you. I was certainly good looking in 2005 when I was like 25 pounds lighter. By the way, that's my workout goal. Lose 20 pounds by the end of the summer. And I've been hardcore at the gym on the elliptical. And let me tell you something. Exercising when the World Cup is on is so easy. I literally am just going to gain all this weight back once it's July and there's not entertaining sports on. But anyways, when do you recognize that you need to keep your game plan or that you need to make something special happen? I honestly say that if you spend all your energy and time trying to get back onto your game plan, it will rapidly become apparent, as you play many more games, it'll become apparent pretty quick when you just need to deviate. So let me give an example. Let's say that you are Artosis. And as Artosis, you have your nice game plan set up for your early game with your Zerglings and Zergling speed to keep you alive. And then your mid game, where you have your Roaches and your Hydras, and your +1/+1. And then your late game, where you have your Ultras and stuff. So those are my 3 steps. That's my beginning, middle, and end. Let us suppose that you experience a 4 Warp Gate push. Exactly what we saw in Game 2. And let's say that you've never seen these replays before. You would say, well, gee, maybe I need to just make Zerglings now and then get Hydralisks and start droning heavily after I'm, not dead. And you do that and you're like, okay, cool. All right, sweet. And as you start playing more, you're like, all right, nice. And it's just dumping back in. But let's say, for instance, let's say something weird happens where some player discovers a weird way to go 3 Gateway Zealot in Protoss vs. Zerg. And you start doing this opening, and after a while, you're trying to force it back onto your game plan, but you're just going, you know what? I just can't do this. This is just too hard. I need to do something completely different. And it's at that point that, in a sense, you had an original game plan, and you just kept spilling into that original game plan, and you said, I just need to have a second plan in this one case. And that's completely okay. So let's pretend you've been playing a ton over 4, 5, 6 weeks. And now you have a way of playing against a Protoss who has all these different kinds of openings. And then you have ways of playing against Protosses who have these Phoenix openings. And ways of playing against Protosses who have these heavy Immortal compositions. And ways against playing against these players who do lots of Dark Templar drops and Warp Prism harassment. You've just spent so long trying to dump back onto your game plan and then having to deal with all these different kinds of possibilities that you have just a good sense of how the matchup works. And then once you're in that state, when you deal with something insane that you've never seen before, your instinct just says, you should really just do this. But of course, my answer that I'm giving is to like the silver or gold level player. The player, or even platinum now that's not the top. These players who don't have a huge range of strategy, and a lot of times there's this gross feeling of, I feel lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And the answer is just have your set game plan and try to force that game plan to work and just keep forcing it to work. And by the way, you'll be blown away how often you can force it to work. But then after a while, you just start going, I just can't force it to work here. It just doesn't work. And that's when you say, well, maybe I just want to do this other thing. And your brain is just in totally the right place. And over time, you are in fantastic shape. So that was my very long answer to that very excellent question. So I will take one more, because again, I'm sorry, I've been going for quite some time now. So let us just do one more one. This is an excellent question. Pandane says, why is it good for a player to stick to his same build order, even after being pressured? Why wouldn't you be afraid it might not work as well, or the opponent might tech switch unfavorably. So my answer to that is that it by sticking to your game plan, even after you've been pressured. How do I actually say that? Well, first of all, it accelerates the pace of your learning by like a million. Because most people, again, think of Starcraft, or actually any strategy game, as this fan, where right where my palms are touching, that's the start of the game, and just the possibilities branch out into infinity. But wouldn't it be nice, or isn't it nice, that really in the mid-game, it's more of an X? There's all these possibilities in the early game, and it sort of converges in the middle, and then it sort of spreads back out at the end. If you have that nice center point, you just always have some direction in your head